Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our show today. We are discussing the topic of parole, the problems of parole, and what can possibly be done to fix them. Not only that, the effect that the state parole is in today has on the recidivism rate. With me is Teresa Norman from Arkansas. Hello, Teresa. How are you?
Doing great. How's everybody there?
We're doing good. Teresa, why don't you tell us what's going on with your parole system in your state, Arkansas?
Well, currently, I don't know if you've read research or do any of the data on all the different states, but Arkansas has like an 80% recidivism rate. And mainly it's because a lot of these people that's incarcerated come from rural areas where there is no jobs. So that, if you can't pay your fines, because, we have debtor's prison here. A lot of states have gotten out of it, but our state will not eliminate the debtor's prison. So therefore, if they don't have money to pay their fines, they're reincarcerated. Or child support, all the little things that can get you thrown in jail. And they're supposed to have a job within 60 days of release. Well, that's kind of hard in rural areas, especially when you've revoked some of these people's driver's license and they can't get nowhere. So that's contributing a lot to our recidivism. And the parole officers, they are lying and manipulating people. They falsify. I know numerous men that has reported in by phone. They'll tell them they don't have transportation. And see, I encourage everybody to get what they call the call recorder to record your conversations. And it's been recorded. Even the parole officers say, okay, we understand. We'll take this as reporting in this month, but try to get here next month. Well, what they do is they turn around and write the person up and say they failed to report in, so then they're listed as an absconder.
Yeah.
So then they're arrested.
Yeah. That doesn't help at all, does it?
No.
That's just down and dirty.
It is. And even though it's recorded, what they do is the police take the cell phones, even though you're supposed to have a warrant to take a person's cell phone. They take the cell phone, so therefore they lose their evidence.
Oh. Well, they really do think they have it figured out, don't they? And this thing about the poverty level. Now, it is a fact in most places, unless it's a major city where you have access to the public transportation system, there is no public transportation, is there? And without that and no car, how are you going to get to work? Men sometimes hitchhike. They've been known to get hurt and killed for it. Most women will not do that, not even to feed their children. They're not going to put their lives in danger by hitchhiking to a minimum wage job.
Well, that's true, and especially if they have kids, how can they afford it?
Yeah, and the losing of the driver's license and everything else. So once you are poor, well, I think it just goes without saying, desperate times create desperate measures. People do get desperate. And so they end up going to jail, and you get your prisons filled up, and everybody in the big level is happy. What shocks me, in Arkansas, do the returning citizens have to pay rent, Teresa?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that was a shock to me when my son got out. I had not heard of that. Growing up in the 70s, you didn't pay rent. In the 80s, friends of mine that got unfortunately incarcerated, when they got out, they didn't pay rent. I wonder how long that's been going on. It seems to me very unfair. Should we expect people fresh out of jail to pay rent? They're unemployed.
That's the problem. And that's why I'm really wanting to do the transitional housing, I'm not so much into the reentry, because what I'm finding with the reentry, they make it more difficult for them to complete the program. I can do the same stuff in transitional housing that I can do in reentry. So, therefore, I can help them get jobs. And what I've been doing is I'm talking to, like, certain factories, and I got on what they call a good grid to see where the majority of jobs are. And a lot of the chicken plants will hire people. Coca-Cola plants will hire people. So my idea or my plan is to, even though I'm an hour away, either way you look at it, is to do a transitional house either in Mountain Home or Batesville. This way I can get people employed. Even though, according to ADC policy and ACC policy, they still have to pay 50% of their stay there. But at least they will have money when they come out.
That's a very good thought, Teresa. Did somebody just join us? Okay, I thought I heard the bell. Yeah, because when you just get out of jail, you don't have any employment, and it could be hard to get it, too. Depending on where you live and what line of work you were formerly in, employment could be months away. And so I asked my son, if you cannot pay rent, what happens then? Well, you go right back. And I almost, I almost said out loud to the poor kid, well, why did they let you out in the first place? It just seemed like, well, why bother? And the rent was extremely high, too. I believe it was over $300 a week. So I started thinking, Teresa, I think if that's the way it's going to be, rent should be charged accordingly. I think the returning citizen should only have to pay what the said room would rent for in the said house it's in the said location, in the said city at that time. Otherwise, they're being totally ripped off. There is just no excuse for that. Because the housing here in Tucson that I have seen, I wouldn't live in.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with how reentry transitional houses work, but there's one that's in Pine Bluff. They charge the guys $150 a week. There is 4 people to a room. They sleep in a bunk bed. So basically it's $150 a bed. Now, within that $150, it does include their food. And they do have access to phones. And they provide transportation to and from work. But it is up to them to find the job. Nobody helps them find a job, which I think that's kind of wrong. You need to help these people get back on their feet. That's part of transition. That's what it's called.
Yes. And is employment hard for returning citizens to find in your state?
Oh, yes, because they have, Pine Bluff just recently passed in their area, you cannot discriminate because they have a felony. In fact, they were informed to get off their applications. Now, in the whole state of Arkansas, yes, they discriminate. If you've been convicted of a felony, they will tell you they can't employ you, or they use the word you don't have the qualification. And it's the same thing with renting. They passed a law that you do not have to rent to a person with a felony.
Yeah, we have that here too. And it's really causing a lot of problems. A lot of our homeless, most of them are either returned citizens or they're mentally ill. And those are the 2 main groups that probably have the most difficult time finding housing in the first place. So we're not making that any easier either. And the thing that puzzles me also is nobody really wants to talk about parole or seems to care in the private sector. But I would think that they would start, because when these people get out and they can't make it, well, they commit crimes. They commit crimes so they can feed themselves, their families, so they can get shelter. This is what happens. So it makes more sense to me to take care of this issue. Hello, did somebody just join us?
Hello, it's Stephen.
Hi, Stephen. Well, Teresa and I we have been talking. Did somebody else come in as well?
Hey, this is Jay Bird.
Hey,
what's up,
Jay,
Bird?
Stephen.
Hey,
Okay, the boys are here, Teresa. Guys, we have been talking about the problems with probation. And so far we have covered employment, and we have covered, go ahead, Teresa, tell them what else we have talked about as far as the issue.
Okay, I don't know if I'm muted or unmuted. I can't tell anymore.
No, you're fine. You're ahead. I heard you.
Well, the problem is, I blame it all on communities. We have covered, they're not able to get places to live, rent, jobs, medical care. I don't know about you, but here, if you're convicted of certain felonies, you cannot get any kind of medical assistance like Medicaid or anything publicly. You don't qualify for low housing, HUD, or any of those public, entities that other people are entitled to. Even though they call it fair housing, it's not fair housing. It still discriminates against certain individuals. You there? Hello?
Yes.
Oh. So we've covered employment. We've covered recidivism, what's causing the recidivism rate, along with parole officers, lack of jobs. And also parole denials is a common thing because they're saying, because of the crime you committed, even though it could be a drug offense, whatever, they're saying that these people can't return back to their families or into their communities because of the crime they committed. That makes no logical sense, especially when even the sheriff will write a letter and say they have no problem with them returning to the community, but yet the parole board says they can't.
That cuts off all their family support right there. Stephen, will you tell us what is going on with parole in Atlanta as far as some of the major issues?
I know from Ohio, it wasn't that bad like that. I know you can get health care through Medicaid and stuff like that. I know that. You can get that. Job-wise, yeah, it's screwy. Job-wise, it's hard to get a job if you're on paper. We had a place in Ohio where I worked at when I got home called Economy Linen, and you folded sheets and blankets and stuff like that, and it had big industrial washers and stuff like that, and that's where I worked at, and that's usually where all the felons got jobs at when they came home, because one of the main people that was one of the main supervisors would hire people. He was ex-felon. So he would smooth the way for you to get in. But other than that, that was the only place that I knew of where I was from that gave you jobs for felons. It was hard. As far as going home to live with family members, I know a lot of places would let you go. But if you had one of those special cases, i.e. sex offense cases, you couldn't go home. You couldn't go there, especially if you lived in an apartment building. You couldn't go there. If the house was close to a school, you couldn't go there. Even if they built the school, you couldn't go. I know some guy that was on the news, he had went to court to battle it. He said when he moved there wasn't no school. He said when he got home and came back, the school was being built. Then they said when the school finally opened up, he had to move because he was more than 1,000 feet, less than 1,000 feet from the school. And like I've always said, 1,000 feet, okay, 1,000 feet, I get it. But if you're going to do something to a child or whatever, you're 1,000 feet is not going to make a difference. You're going to go do it anyway. I guess they're saying that because you'll just go to the bus stop and get them if that's what you're going to do. 1,000 feet, that whole sex offender law, don't get me started on that. The whole sex offender law is full of crap. That what was the name of the law? Amanda Law, whatever it was, Amanda. My thing with that is not every person that was on a sex case had something to do with kids. Now, if you had a child offense, then that's a totally different story. But something like who was it? JD was talking about the husband and wife who had sex out in the park and got caught. They had to get sentenced as a sex offender. Is that right for them that can't live near school? They were husband and wife, and they were grown.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, JD was talking about that the last time we was on talking about the sex offense cases. But as far as probation and parole, I would say to me, and I was on probation because I got early release, I'd rather be on probation than parole. I've heard so many bad stories about parole and how they do people that's on parole and how they flop people and stuff like that. I'm so glad I was new law and not old law, because I just don't think it's right how people who've done their time, you get 10 years and you get flopped for 6 or 7 more. That's not fair. That's not fair at all.
Right. Well, as my son likes to tell me, most of them like to kill their number now, which means finish their sentence, because it is so hard to make it on the outside. What is in your state, Stephen, do the returning citizens have to pay rent when they immediately get out in the halfway house? How does that work?
In Ohio, when I was living there, they did, but here in North Carolina, I don't know what their thing is here in North Carolina, but I need to find that out, especially since I live in this state. I need to find that out. I know Ohio, they did. They did have to pay. It was more of a fee to parole, to the parole officer and probation. You had to pay that. I had to pay $25 every 2 weeks or every month, $25 a month to be on probation. So I'm paying for you to watch me. That's basically what it is. I'm paying you money to watch me.
Wow.
And I don't know that's not right. And then if you can't get a job, how you gonna pay it? And then if you can't pay it, you get in trouble. That's not fair either. So that's kind of double jeopardy to me. You're gonna send me back to jail because I can't pay my fees and my fines or pay my rent or whatever because I can't get a job. So how am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to survive? And then you have tent city people who are felons that live out in tents in the middle of nowhere, living homeless now, and that doesn't stop anything, because if you are I'll go back to the sex offender. You're a sex offender. You live out in the middle of nowhere, in the woods or in a tent. So how are they going to keep track of you? They can't. So
That's right.
You're defeating the purpose right there. So it just shows you right there. It's stupid, because you tell me, you can't live here, you can live there. But if I live out in the middle of nowhere, how are you going to find me? You off the grid.
That's right. And you can move anytime you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You sure can.
Well, Jay Bird, how are you tonight?
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, just another day in paradise.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the parole in your state. What are some of the issues that you all are facing?
Yes, ma'am. Well, first off, I don't know if you guys are aware of this or know this, but I'm not originally from Florida. My home state is Washington State, and that's where I'm from. I've been in Florida for 4 years, so I really can't talk base, if you will, on Florida's parole or probation, but I can dang well talk about Washington State's situation. So is that good?
Sure.
Okay.
That's fine.
When I lived in Washington State, just like Steve hit on some very, very good information or insight. That was awesome information, Steve. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. But just to clarify, me personally, I think probation and parole is a waste of taxpayers' money. It's a joke. To me personally, they have you set up for failure even when you've already done your punishment and your time in the joint. So me personally, I think if you do your time in the joint or in the prison, depending on what kind of charge it is and all that, I think it should be over and that's it. And you should be able to try to have a second chance at life once you reach the gates. That's just my personal opinion, because again, it could be wrong, but I'm speaking just from experience and what I've had to deal with. I also had to live in a halfway house. I had to go through all that, all that pain pain in the ass, if I can say that. Sorry, if I can say that. But it was very strict. It was I had to pay rent too, and if I didn't have rent, I'm going right back where I came from. You know, so Steve hit that right on the button. And me personally, I think they need to take a lot of that stuff out of there, because again, honestly, there is no room whatsoever for people that can't. Okay, there's no room for the bills, the rent, the strictness, all that, because if there's supposed to be this thing called second chance, where is it? Because when you're on probation or when you're on parole, whatever the case may be, you don't really have a second chance. You're under their beck and call. Does that make sense? So personally, I personally think it's a ridiculous waste of money, time, and resources. I think once you do your time, you're done. That's my personal opinion.
I would agree with that, Jay. I want to ask everybody this question. You know, parole came around originally, I believe, in order to help with the overcrowding in prisons. So
yes.
They didn't have such a hard time with that. Now, if we got rid of parole, what would happen if we cut all the sentences across the board? There was a project done about this where everybody's sentenced, all crimes, cut in half, the sentence cut in half. And this did solve a lot of the overcrowding within a short period of time. Let me start with you, Teresa, then you, Stephen, then you, Jay. Can you speak about that? What is your opinion, Teresa, about just cutting all the sentences in half?
Well, actually, it would be an excellent idea, because really what we're doing is we're doing excessive sentencing in order to feed the Department of Corrections, which they have private industries that all these inmates work for that makes them profit. So therefore, if we cut the sentencing grid, it would cut the prison population, and it was going to cut their pay. They're not going to be very happy about that. Do you see where I'm going?
I agree. Yes, I do.
Because we have, Arkansas Correctional Industries, which they all have factories that they're contracted to, that all the prisoners, and they're prisoners, they're not really inmates. This isn't a hotel, because they're held against their will. But they're making big profits, and legislators have invested into these companies to make these profits. So in order to make this kind of a change, we've got to get legislators on board and elect people in our offices that are going to listen. Fortunately, I've done pretty good so far this year. I mean, they can't put people back if they're applied for disability or they're disabled for not paying their probation fees. We got that passed. They didn't get to increase their fees to $55. They have to leave it at $35.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, because they don't need more money, do they?
No, they make plenty of money. But the problem is nobody wants to look at all this starts at the top. And people keep saying, oh, it's President Trump, it's President Trump. He has no control over states. That's your governors and your legislators.
That's right. Okay, well, thank you for pointing that out, because we really do have to mention it. I know the public gets tired of hearing that, but, yeah, we need to start writing letters and voting and all of that stuff. Stephen, I'm to you now. What do you think? Would it be bad, good? Well, how would that work in your state if they were to cut all the sentences across the board in half?
You should cut the sentences all across the board in half?
Yeah, everybody's sentenced like armed robbery here in Arizona, 2.5 years. They do 1 1/4.
Okay.
For all the crimes. Well, of course, we can't do it for murder, but let's just say all the minor crimes.
Right, yeah. Felony 1, 2, and 3 would probably be kind of hard to do that.
Yeah.
It kind of depends. I would say it depends on the crime. Like we just said, it depends on the crime, because if, like you just said, you say that you're drug dealing, or you get caught with meth and all type of stuff, they send you to jail for say 6 years. 6 years for a drug offense, to me, is a little bit, unless you're a repeat offender. It's overkill. You're just a statistic. You're just money. That's all you are. And I tell people all the time, you're a money hog. I hate to say that, you're a money pig, because they send you to jail. They know you're going to be there. Most likely you're going to reoffend, so you're going to keep on coming back. It's just like JD said, it's a revolving door. And just like Don said, it's a revolving door. So you are your livestock, because it's easy to put somebody in prison for something like that, because most likely you're going to reoffend and you're going to go right back. That's more money. And there has to be a way, just like you said, that we need to be able to cut it. You're right. That's where it has to start at. We have to cut it some type of way. And just like Don said, you can really blame, I'm not a Trump fan, of course. I'm not a Trump fan. Everybody knows that. But you can't blame him for everything. Like she said, it starts with your governor, it starts with your legislation. That's where it starts at.
Right.
You got to get rid of that.
Absolutely. Well, pardon me, I do want to clarify this. I believe the study did say for nonviolent offenses. They did, that's right, they did clarify that. So we're not talking violent offenses. We're only talking nonviolent offenses, cutting the sentence in half. Jay Bird, what do you say about that?
Well, and to be totally honest with you all, I think everybody's right on task, and I agree with everybody's conversation. Again, just like everybody says, depending on the crime itself, I think all petty, rinky-dink charges should be either lessened or put on a scale where it's like, okay, like if you're a first-time offender, if that makes sense, you shouldn't really do a lot of prison time. You should maybe do, depending on the crime, give or take a year, maybe a few months, and then get the heck out and hopefully stay out. But that's the problem. Everybody keeps, I know it's a system. The system itself makes you keep coming back and forth. You get out, you do good for a couple months, and then all of a sudden you fall, and you're right back in the walls again. So again, personally, it all depends on the situation. But all the petty crimes, all the small marijuana beefs, I wouldn't say some of the hardcore drugs because those ones are deadly, but marijuana at least, we should get the prisons emptied out with all the marijuana charges or beefs. That will really cut down the overcrowding. I think there's a lot of people in there that are in prison for petty-ass crimes that don't need to be in there. They've served their time. They need to get out. So, like I said, it's all across the board. It all depends. And I agree with everybody on this conversation.
Well, let me ask you all this. Another point that this project for cutting the sentences in half pointed out is that there was something to be said for not getting these people used to being incarcerated for such a long period of time that when they were released, it was impossible for them to get re-inclined towards society. Teresa, what do you think about that?
Well, you got to figure if they've been incarcerated for 10, 15 years, they've got culture to that environment. And you have to look at all the social economic changes that has occurred out here in society. So when they're thrown back out here, they have no skills, no coping skills, because they're used to being told when to eat, sleep, and shit, basically. So they can't cope. It's easier for them to be institutionalized because that is what they're accustomed to. So a lot of times they will do petty crimes just to get thrown back. You there?
Yes, that's very true, Teresa. Now, Stephen, what do you think about people getting used to being incarcerated after a certain period of time? Stephen?
I understand completely what you said. Once you get locked up and you get in the system and you can't find no place to go, You don't have no Medicare. You can't get meds because you're sick or whatever. Now you have no hospital. You have no doctors. So even though the doctors in the prisons are quacks, most of them, they're better than not having nothing at all. You're getting 3 meals a day. A lot of guys who go in there come out looking better than they did when they went in because you're eating, you're resting, if you call that rest. I know when I went in, I lost almost 100 pounds, 150 pounds inside because I couldn't get the food that I used to eat on the outside. I had to eat the nasty stuff in there, and I worked out and stuff like that. So there's sometimes guys be like, you know what, I'm better off being inside prison because I got they're taking care of me. I hate to say that, they're taking care of me. And a lot of people got TV. You got a TV. You got TV. You got a radio. You know, a lot of people didn't have that, and you got that stuff now on inside. You know, we had cable. We had movies. We had movies every Friday night. So a lot of guys didn't have that on the outs. So
right.
Why go back? Why not go back?
Well, Stephen, you're going to put Weight Watchers out of business tonight.
Yes, I am.
The new diet.
Yeah, the new diet is having a prison number.
Yeah, oh dear. Well, that's another good point, though, Stephen. It really is because when they come outside, everything's gone, and it's very difficult to get anything at all, whereas in prison, certain things have to be provided. Now, Jaber, aside from the weight loss benefit, listen, what do you think about people getting used to being incarcerated after being in there a period of time?
Well, here's my personal opinion. I think honestly, if what we need to do is figure out how to get these people not to be like that. You know, because if they serve too much time, that's all they're going to know. And I have a brother that's been in since 1994. So just think about that for a second. That's a lot of time in prison, and that's all you know. He doesn't know the streets. He doesn't know the outside world. He doesn't even know he can't believe what the flat screen TVs look like right now, or cell phones. He thinks it's still 1994. So
yeah.
So, and that's my brother, and like I said, he's 1 year younger than I am. So he's walking, talking proof of what that looks like to answer that question. I wish I could answer it better because I didn't do a lot of time. But again, me personally, if we can cut down the times, I think there will be less of that.
Yes, that I definitely agree with. I've thought this for some time. They did a study here in Arizona. All they did was watch the way people watch freshly released from prison after, say, 1 year, 2 years, so on and so forth. And what they found was any time after 4 years, the inmates just released walked as if they had the shackles on their legs, their ankles.
Yes.
Their steps were even, measured, and slow, very slow. Whereas they didn't seem to have that response up until 3 years. Isn't that interesting? Because I thought, well, that says a lot. And we all know that human beings get used to an environment. We can get used to anything at all that we have to.
Right.
So, does anybody else have anything on the subject of the problems of parole, what we could be changing before we sign off for tonight?
Well, if I could say something real quick.
Go ahead.
If they could cut back at least, I don't know, either probation, some of the strictness or guidelines on the probation, I think things will be probably a bit better, or just get rid of it completely. That's just my opinion. Of course, I don't know if everybody agrees with me on that. I understand the purpose why we have it, folks. I get it. It's to try to keep them in line so they won't fall. But you're going to fall regardless if you're on it or off of it. So, it depends on where the individual's mindset's at. That's just my personal opinion. But as far as the parole part of it, even the strictness of that, I don't know if my brother is even up for parole yet. I know he has an appeal coming up here soon. Again, that's a slow process just in itself. So if he gets that appeal where it goes bad for him, the next thing he's going to try is go to the parole board and see what happens with that. But again, we'll see what happens. But I think the strictness, everything's so biased nowadays, and that's my personal opinion.
I think you're absolutely right, and we certainly all wish your brother much luck.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say before we close off?
Jay Bird, I think you said 100% right there, man. Too many people are biased. Like you said, they say, oh, well, you're a convicted felon. Like they said, your application goes right to the trash. Do you put application that says you've got a felon?
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you.
Something about that has to change, too. I'm not saying you need to hire a murderer, but if a murderer's done his time, he's got to have a job somewhere.
Hey, I've seen some good people do work like that.
Yep. There's so much work you can do. There's a lot of stuff out there.
There's all where your heart's at, man.
That's right.
Well, I don't know.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know about in you all states, but in Arkansas, if they give you a 15-year sentence, they also add on there a 20-year SIS. So therefore,
what's that?
Suspended imposed sentence. So therefore, if you screw up while you out here on parole or whatever, you have to go back and do that 20 years.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Oh, that's not fair.
But
so
that's what they do in Arkansas.
How's that a second chance?
It's not a second chance. It's like my son they gave 15 years to for a drug offense. He wasn't selling drugs. He was doing drugs.
Wow.
Oh, God. Oh, wow. Wow.
So, see, that's where the support needs to be taking place right there. We need more support groups.
And it's like I tried to tell them. I sent him to drug rehab. He was ready to go. He already hit rock bottom. He said he's ready to get help. He got the help. Says no, don't matter. We're going to send him to the Arkansas Department of Corrections for 15 years, and he will get the help he needs in there.
Oh, yeah. Wow. I'm sorry.
Oh, that is awful, Teresa.
As I said, then they turned around and gave him a 20-year SIS.
See, that's not fair.
Yeah, it seems to me it's that way here in Arizona, the attitude of where, if you have gone to jail once, that's it. We hate you. We don't even want to acknowledge you. However, I must say this last time when my son got out, I did notice one very positive change, and that was in the employment. Now, I'm talking about minimum wage jobs here, everybody. But if you are willing to settle for one of those and you're a convicted felon in Arizona, there are so many returned citizens in my state that they are pulling together for each other. Okay? Wow. It's an easy in. Guaranteed. Somebody there was incarcerated and they worked their way up to where they're in charge. You just got to keep trying and you will get employed in the state of Arizona. Minimum wage.
If I can say this real quick, there are felony-friendly jobs. You just gotta find them. There are friendly jobs out there. You just gotta find them.
Right. Yeah. You gotta look a little bit, but that's one thing that they're doing by this mass incarceration is little by little it is getting a little bit easier as time goes on. So. Is there anything else anybody wanted to say?
JB.
Well, that's why I've talked to these other companies about hiring felons because, to go along with my transitional housing. And I want the stigmatism removed because we don't go around calling people adulterers.
No.
Right.
We haven't done that in a long time.
No. So, if we need to remove the stigmatism. We don't go around going, hey, that person's schizophrenic. Oh, that's an adulterer. Oh, man, that guy got 14. We don't do that.
No. Well, not in your family, but no. Yeah, we're really, I don't think it personally, it should not matter to people, because a mistake is a mistake is a mistake. And what the public doesn't know about what the government is doing with this mass incarceration could fill a book, seriously. I know, I'm working on one. So it's, it's just got to come to a stop, and we've all got to team up together. Let's get the word out, and let's stop this nonsense. I mean, the public doesn't become aware until something happens to them, and then they find out, well, we're a victim of crime, and they find out exactly what's going on in this whole story. Because it doesn't just start with a person committed a crime, they went to jail. I'm sorry.
Right.
There is a whole story before that.
Like you said, the victim, the crime, victim's crime, or whatever you just said there, it's always that. And if we can try to figure out how to change that up a little bit, things will change too. Because it's always, oh, I'm a victim of crime. Okay, and we get that. We're sorry for you. Let's move on. You know, that type of thing. They blow weight out of proportion. They change the thing so much. There's just absolutely no chance for us to make it out here.
That goes along with snowflakes. You say something and they melt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I have noticed with some of these victims advocate groups. Now, I'm talking about women that have been victims of domestic violence and rape and whatnot. They don't find out what the role the government's playing in this mass incarceration until they become a victim and their abuser gets out, and they're like, no, wait a minute, what's going on? And they find out the whole story then and think, oh, okay, so it actually started back when they were being raised as children, okay? What people don't know could fill a book, and that's what's bothering me. And they should care, because when these people get out, they will commit crimes.
Right.
I'm not saying they're going to be violent, but they're going to have to eat.
Right. And that's the reason crimes are committed, because there's no money for them to survive on. And the reason why I don't think they really mean to commit crimes, but they got to survive, and that's all based on survival.
Yes, it is. It is. And a lot of the recidivism, they're back in there because they had to survive.
You know, food's
and
not cheap anymore. You can't. I mean, it's still strict out here. You can't even get on food stamps. You can't get on any government assistance programs because they've strict it out too much, even for felons. And it's a it's a petty thing that upsets me to bitter no end. Because, you know, look, I'm a taxpayer. You're all taxpayers. We pay into that, and they call the shots on that? I don't think so.
Well, on a closing note tonight, I would just like to say to people out there, picture yourself in this situation. You have been incarcerated for 5 years. You are just released. You have the clothes on your back and no coat. You've got a pair of cheap shoes on your feet and no socks, and there's enough money for you to eat today and tomorrow and maybe get a roof over your head, and then you're broke and you're homeless. And what are you going to do?
Find a way to come up with some money.
Exactly. So I'm asking people, think about that, and then put yourselves in some of these inmates' shoes when we think about parole. And I want to thank everybody for coming on. This has been a great show, and I want to thank you for your participation and wish you all a wonderful night.
Thank you very much for having us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, Don, we are done.